There are lots of people here who are experts in risk, and there are lots of people here who are experts in communication. And often it's about how those two things work together. Clearly, it's about how quantifiable is any risk for an organization, and about reputational risk, something which is harder to quantify, possibly in an actuarial sense, but is also possibly one of the most important issues. We have a remarkably august panel. Directly to my left, someone who needs very little introduction, actually, Lord Peter Levine, the chairman of Lloyd's.
I've seen quite a lot of this from fairly close quarters. And I think perhaps the two best examples of it, in my experience, have been Lloyd's and Canary Wharf. Canary Wharf, for those of you who may remember, back in 1993, when I went there, there were lots of articles in the papers about how long will it be before they put the tape around the buildings and they just have the wind blowing through the empty windows and it'll be the end of the world. And all of a sudden, today, there's 100,000 people working there, and I think that it's a pretty remarkable operation. And when I started, I would phone up chairman and chief executive of a large corporation and say, come down and see us. And they'd say, where is it? It's sort of over there somewhere, isn't it? And then when they got there, they found not only that it really wasn't that far away, but it was actually quite a nice place. Then we found out, for example, that somebody was coming down for the first time, they jump in a cab. And they said to the taxi driver, take me to Canary Wharf. What do you want to go there for? I mean, you're going to be in my cab all day. So we got all the taxi drivers down. We had 3 giant tea parties, made together a very good party. Next time somebody jumped in the cab, said, I want to go to Canary Wharf. Wonderful place. Have you ever been down there before? You have to get this branding issue right. You have to get the reputation right. The whole issue of reputation is so important because it's perception. And I think the perception is the thing you have to think about. That's what you see when you pick up the papers in the morning. What do you know about this? Is it going to work or not? You have to analyze the problem scientifically. You've got to find out. And then you've got to think of some fairly unusual ways of addressing that problem and getting a message across. Once you get it across, then you're okay.
Philip, a few thoughts on to kick us off.
Now, let us cast our minds back to the development of sophisticated financial institutions in the UK and to a lesser extent in continental Europe. This was a period in the UK, at least, of astonishingly liberal regulation, to which the market responded by developing highly sophisticated institutions and commercial brands which were marketed, the main selling point of which was their reputation, especially their reputation for prudence. Now, it's tempting to think that this is all a product of a bygone age and that we now need bureaucratic regulation to do this sort of job which was once done by sound behaviour, good ethical behaviour, prudence, brand building, and so on. But the evidence, in fact, runs the other way. Statutory regulation and also providing financial guarantees have changed the priorities of financial institutions. The emphasis of regulation should be on transparency, the publication of information to the market, and making sure that financial firms are responsible for their own financial decisions.
Mark Bukowski, a man well known to everybody in the media. Mark, when it's all going wrong, what on earth do you do?
I think it's interesting, I'm third in now, and we haven't yet talked about the digital world we now all exist in. We have no idea what the revolution is going to do about how we control and manage reputation. How are we going to be able to respond quickly and not let the markets and the conversation get out of our control?
How do corporations, and how good are they at integrating a notion of what the digital space means for them as organisations?
Some are brilliant and some are frightened of it. Some people don't understand it. I say to a number of people who do a lot of work in this area, you need to use it. Even if you're a voyeur, you need to understand its potential because it's enormous.
Very, very interesting, Mark. Tommy, a few thoughts.
For an individual accused of some transgression, things are relatively straightforward. Either they did it and hoped that no one would find out, or they didn't, and it's just basically unfair. For corporates, where we typically work, it's usually more complicated. Is our supplier using child labour? Was it outside sabotage or poor maintenance on our part? Getting solid information from a trusted third party who can then back it up with their own reputation is probably the answer.
How best can corporations manage that space where speed and accuracy may come into conflict?
What Charles was talking about was getting that answer out. What I'm talking about is getting an accurate answer. If you're talking about a factory half an hour's drive from where the headquarters are, you can get that answer pretty quickly. But when you're talking about an accusation that your supplier uses child labour in Bangladesh, it may be more complicated.
John.
We have a potentially catastrophic risk and reputation to the whole of our business model. And we're not going to address that by addressing the needs of individual companies. We're going to address it by addressing the lack of trust about our collective values as wealth creators. And I think there is a real issue of lack of trust, and we know this from the Edelman barometers and all the other indicators that the profession produces, the systemic danger of a lack of trust in our system. And I think a lot of business leaders are increasingly worried about that. I think there is a risk there about public acceptance and attitudes to globalization, whether actually we want to be in a game, which is very much my day job, to say rightly brings huge benefits to the global citizen. If I summed up where most of my chief executives are, is they spent the last decade believing that protecting their reputation was about saying what they mean. They now decided that the public's calling them out on a much more important question, meaning what they say.
My question is around the balance between transparency and risk disclosure, and that against the positive management of message, which has been referred to by a number of the speakers.
I think for companies, the important thing is for them to have somebody there who's going to sort the wheat from the chaff and tell them what's really going on, and where they've got a real issue that they're going to have to deal with long term, and when they've got a real issue that they've got to have to deal with short term.
I think the market move on. People can get bored, and in the old way, you shove a hard hat down, put your head below the parapet, and hope that the hurricane would pass over you. Is how can you defend yourself? Have you got the systems and the analytics to tell you what is happening? Then can you prepare to deal with those things? And have you got the structure and organisation that actually puts a head on, so let's get away from it and hope it goes away, or can we face up and actually challenge it?
I'm not sure that large corporations are aware of how the media drive and make the news, and also now that with social media, the consumer, the public, also drive and make the news. I'm not convinced that they are really aware about that.
I mean, as a lobbyist, one of my biggest challenges is how legislators and parliamentarians misunderstand risk. One of the last conversations I had with Tony Blair as Prime Minister, he was bemoaning the fact that so much of the pressures on a modern government come from a public concern about risk and the way that politicians then feel the need to over-respond.
Illuminating and fascinating discussion from the panel. Thank you very much.